Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, we're going to be discussing surprise cut candidates for your Pittsburgh Steelers. 8 players that might get surprisingly cut before the Steelers make their final 53-man roster before the start of the 2025 regular season. Before we get into the content today, we really appreciate you guys. And if you appreciate the work that we do here at Steelers Talk to give you guys free, insightful, in-depth Steelers content here on the YouTube platform, you guys can send in a super thanks today to tip us here at Steelers Talk. And here's the deal I'm going to make. Everybody that's super thanks on this video, we're going to give a shout out to later this week here on Steelers Talk, all right? So the way that you super thanks is you click the heart button with the money sign in the middle. You send in any dollar amount, all right? It could be $1, $2, whatever you guys want to tip us here at Steelers Talk. You guys send it in, and if you send it in, we will make sure to get you a shout out on a future edition of Steelers Talk later this week. Now, before we get into my list here, I want to be abundantly clear. I'm not necessarily predicting that all 8 of the players I'm discussing today are not going to make the roster. All right, I'm saying that these are 8 relatively surprising names that I think a lot of people kind of expect to make the final roster or have made the roster in the past that I think have a chance to be cut this offseason. Okay, so you take a look at my first name, and it's Mark Robinson, who has made this team multiple times and, is a special teams contributor. And there's still a possibility he could make the final roster because he is a good special teams player. But he is an undersized inside linebacker. He's not particularly good in coverage. He's more of just a true special teams player at this point in time. And with this team adding Malik Harrison, Carson Bruner, Cole Holcomb, getting back into the fold here, it's looking like there's less and less room for Mark Robinson to prove that he deserves to be kind of like a 5th inside linebacker in this group. I could certainly see him with the experience that he has with this team to be a prime practice squad candidate with the players that they currently have in the inside linebacker room. But I do think with the additions to the off-ball linebacker group here that Robinson has a chance to be cut this year. Then we get to James Pierre, somebody that every time he's been on the Steelers roster in the preseason, he's made the final roster, all right? So he is somebody that, Mike Tomlin has an affinity for. He's played a lot of football for this football team. Not necessarily fantastic football, but, he has played a lot, and he does have chemistry with some of the guys in this locker room here. But you take a look at the additions they've made to the cornerback room here, and I like some of them. I like Dante Kent. I like Brandon Echols. I like Corey Trice Jr. as depth pieces to Joey Porter Jr., Darius Slay, and Beanie Bishop Jr. I even like Sebastian Castro, who'd be more of a backup nickel / backup safety in this group. But it wouldn't shock me at all if James Pierre ends up being on the outs at the end of the preseason this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the final 53. Then we get to the offense here. We'll talk about a wide receiver, Scotty Miller, and I think that Scotty, he's somebody that made the team last year. It seems like Arthur Smith has a little bit of an affinity for him, and, he got some production last year, not a whole lot, but he did get a little bit. And you take a look at the wide receiver room this year. DK, obviously, is the big addition. You still have George Pickens, obviously. You got Calvin Austin III. You add Robert Woods, which was a move that I think Scotty Miller probably didn't love too much because the Steelers usually carry 6 wide receivers, which means that he's probably on the outs. That is, if Ben Skoranek and Roman Wilson are also slated to get final roster spots here. So Scotty's somebody that's definitely going to have to prove his worth with this football team during the offseason program and during training camp. Really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do, but he certainly has a chance to get cut. Dean Lowry is somebody that this team brought in last offseason, is somebody that they really like as a depth piece, but it wouldn't shock me at all if they end up cutting him. He's dealt with injuries, and honestly, I think that there's just better players overall in this defensive line group. You take a look at the 4-man front that the Steelers are going with next year. The Steelers spend over 80% of their snaps in a 4-down front. You got Benton and Hayward as your starters. You spent a first-round pick on Derek Harmon. You bring in Daniel Ekuale. Of course, you draft Y.A. Black as well, who's probably definitely going to make the roster as a nose tackle type of player. And you have to think between Isaiah Loudermilk, Logan Lee, and Dean Lowry, somebody's going to get cut in that group there. And I think that Lowry, if he doesn't have a good preseason, has a chance to kind of surprisingly get cut as a veteran player on this defense. So coming up here, the real fun begins. I get to some more surprising Steelers cut candidates here, including some names that I think might make some people upset, but I'm going to explain my reasonings here in just a moment. But first, take a guess for me down there in the comments section. Which players will surprisingly make the 53-man roster for the Steelers? Who are your guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. What is somebody that is surprising that is going to make the final 53-man roster? But before we get into all that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash all on your phone. You can download the Prize Picks app today. And with millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can also turn your playoff hot takes into tickets this basketball season. And you can get tickets to basketball's championship series even, because every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you in the Takes Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the championship. Sign up today and get $50 instantly, and you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, where every Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. If you guys want to see an example of a PrizePicks projection here during the basketball playoffs, this is what it looks like. I'm taking the more on points per game average for the New York Knicks series versus the Boston Celtics for Jalen Brunson. I'm doing the same thing for points per game for Kristaps Porzingis, taking the more on him as well, and I'm taking the less on points per game average for Mikal Bridges. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Now we get into a little bit more of the spicy section here, where I got Cole Holcomb as a potential cut candidate for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the way that Cole gets cut, guys, is if he has just a bad preseason, and after that horrific knee injury, he just doesn't look up to snuff, which I do think is a realistic possibility. We do see guys that take a whole year off of football, especially coming off a big injury like that. And it's not like Holcomb was like a dynamic player before the injury. So if he's decreased athletically from that point, I do think that there is a chance that he ends up getting cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if other off-ball linebackers in this group, like Carson Bruner or Mark Robinson, really has a good preseason. I think that there is a chance that Holcomb could be the odd man out. I'm really rooting for him. Obviously, this entire journey to get back to the football field was really arduous for him. I'm really hoping that he can come out and have a really good season, but I do want to acknowledge the reality that there is a chance that he could get cut. Then we get to Cordero Patterson, who I was actually in favor of just cutting just straight up this offseason, and it's still possible here that if they want to bring on like a J.K. Dobbins or a Nick Chubb or something like that, I could certainly see the Steelers let go of Cordero Patterson as well, who is somebody that, you know, is more of just a special teams player at this point. He had some nice runs last year, but honestly, he looked a lot slower than in previous seasons there with the Atlanta Falcons and other teams last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's RB4 on the depth chart right now, and depending on how many running backs the Pittsburgh Steelers want to keep on the roster, I just don't know how much sense it makes to keep Cordero on the field. And honestly, his special teams value isn't even that high. He wasn't really an effective kick returner last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I do think there's a decent chance he could get cut. Then this one might surprise some people, but Robert Woods, and this is kind of similar to the Cole Holcomb thing, where like, what if Robert Woods is just older and, he's not, really working up to snuff? And what if some of the other wide receivers in this group, maybe like a Brandon Johnson or Scotty Miller, or maybe one of the wide receivers they brought in as UDFAs really show out? I think that if I had to guess right now, I definitely think Robert Woods makes the roster. He's a really good run blocker. He is a pros pro. Would be a very good mentor to younger receivers like George Pickens and Roman Wilson with this football team. But do I think it's a 100% chance he makes the roster? I wouldn't go that far, because he is somebody that is aging. He's somebody that's lost a lot of his athleticism, and if that dip continues to slide here during the preseason, there's other younger, more talented, more athletically gifted players that are showing out during the preseason. I can't say it would completely shock me if Bobby Trees doesn't make the final 53. Then we get to one that might shock some people as well, Roman Wilson. And again, this is surprise cut candidates, and The way that this happens is just Roman Wilson's not a good football player, guys. And, I don't think this is going to happen. I will say that right now. I'm a believer in Roman Wilson. I actually think, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes here, Rodgers has had a lot of success with similar type of receivers to Roman Wilson. My pro comp for Roman was Randall Cobb, who of course was one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite receivers in his entire career. I think there's a chance Roman Wilson could be a really solid number 3 receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, but he needs to prove it. All right, he had an opportunity to make get on the field last year, and he never really seized that opportunity. Apparently, he had a really tough time picking up the playbook, and if that continues into year 2 and they just don't think that he's good enough to play, and there's, like I said, other players that really have good preseasons, this might be a very unfortunate cut for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say it's highly unlikely. I think that, this guy's essentially going into his rookie season. They're going to give him some leeway. He would have to be really, really bad during the preseason and training camp for them to cut him, but I can't say at this point it's a 100% certainty that he'll be on the roster. So take a guess for me down there in the comment section. Which players will surprisingly not make the final 53-man roster? I gave you some names today to consider. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. I appreciate you guys stopping by and making it to the end of today's video. If you liked what you heard today and you want more of it in the future, click that subscribe button right now to never miss one of our videos.